What if I told you that there are actually 5 distinct categories of devil fruits, and Oda slowly introduced them over the course of the series, in order of most simple to most complex. And now that we are in the endgame of the story, we are reaching the 5th and final category, the god fruits. Fruits like the Nika fruit, the quote-unquote devil fruit, and arguably even the Nidhogg fruit, that actually break several previously established, long-running rules of how devil fruits function. Today we're going to be breaking down how Oda evolved the concept of devil fruits across 3 distinct phases, to take us from one-dimensional abilities to complex abilities to now near limitless abilities, and what this evolution implies for the endgame of the series and the potential god fruits that we may still have around the corner. But before we get into it, make sure to subscribe. But first, we are doing a huge spring sale where you can buy any 2 posters and get 3 free. And I mean any posters, because this month only we are bringing back all the posters from all of our collections. That's right, you can mix and match any 5 posters from any collection, and when you add them to the cart, 3 of them will automatically be free. And this month only, you can also get the God Trio of posters: Nidhogg, Nika, and Emu, each with their own hidden image inside the poster. If you've been holding off on getting your posters, this spring sale is your chance to get them at a major discount. The spring sale ends in April, and the God Trio posters are going out of production. So get your posters while this spring sale lasts by hitting the link in the description below. So what stands out early on in One Piece when devil fruits are introduced is how surprisingly simple this power system is in comparison to most all other shonen series out there. Even compared to One Piece's contemporaries, Naruto and Bleach, in those series you would regularly see characters showcasing an extremely wide variety of jutsu or very abstract zanpakuto, whereas in One Piece, devil fruits were, by definition, always very one-note. Each fruit lets you do one basic thing. The power is pretty much exactly what the name says. The Kilo fruit lets you gain or lose kilos. The wax fruit lets you use wax, the bison fruit turns you into bison, so on and so forth. Once you know a character's devil fruit name, you pretty much have the gist of everything they can do, with some rare exceptions. This made One Piece powers relatively limited in many ways compared to other series, and originally Zoans were probably the ultimate example of this. The absolute simplest devil fruit concept in One Piece is the basic Zoan fruit. Zoans are the type of fruit that are easiest to invent without much thought. It's just the power to turn into an animal. Not multiple animals, just turn into one animal. Sure, some animals are cooler than others, like a leopard compared to a dog, but at the end of the day, this is the type of fruit that Oda can basically just pump out whenever he feels like giving a character an ability, but an ability that's not too important or too strong. In fact, normal Zoan fruits are so boring that Lucci is the only main villain that Oda has ever given a basic Zoan fruit to. And beyond that, to date, there is not a single top tier character in One Piece that Oda has ever bothered giving a normal Zoan fruit to, as ultimately Zoan fruits are basically just a physical stats buff. Some can also let you fly or dig, but for the most part, it's just a physical buff. Now, certainly more interesting than Zoans are Logias. However, while gaining power over an element is generally much more unique than just getting a stats boost, Logias are still just the concept of one ability, being able to use one element. In theory, we could get to see lots of variations of what it means to have complete power over a single element, but Oda generally keeps it simple with most Logia. I mean, we've had 2 fire fruit users at this point who basically both just like to do basic fire things, like fire punches and fireballs. Aokiji just freezes people or shoots ice projectiles. And let's not even get started on Akainu, who is arguably the strongest Logia user we've had in the story so far, who basically exclusively does magma punches. So yeah, as powerful as Logias can be in the One Piece world, they are still generally very one note. I would argue that Kizaru is the only Logia where we've seen a truly varied repertoire of abilities on display. But he is the exception. Overall, it's clear that for the first part of the series, by and large, Oda definitely preferred simplicity in the abilities that he wrote. This applied to Paramecia's as well. Paramecia's initially had the most potential to be unique, as they aren't bound by a concept of animal or element. But despite that, at the same time, the vast majority of Paramecias are again very one note. You eat weapons to use the weapons, you split your body into parts, your legs turn into springs, your skin is smooth, you can make disguises, you can turn your body into a sword, etc. Paramecias could still be very powerful. For instance, the Gura no Mi is even now still in contention for the most destructively powerful fruit, but it's still a very one-dimensional ability. It just does one thing, quake attacks. So bottom line, for a long time, despite there being 3 categories, One Piece's signature ability, the Devil Fruits, were largely simplistic and one-dimensional in the grand scheme of shonen abilities. But this simply mirrors how Oda likes to write his stories in general. Oda prefers to go from simple to complex. Just look at his world-building style, or how he scaled up the plot, or the lore, and so on. Deceptively simple to shockingly complex is Oda's MO. And so as time went on, Oda began to play with the rules of Devil Fruits a bit. As we get deep in the series, we see Paramecias, for example, that still technically only do one thing, but the users have found a wide variety of applications that make it feel like it's actually a diverse set of abilities. For example, Big Mom's power is technically just to give life through soul manipulation, but that one power effectively gives her a wide range of powers, with Big Mom being one of the first instances in One Piece where a character can essentially have fire powers and lightning powers and weather powers and even water powers. Similarly, Doflamingo can technically just make strings, but with his wide variety of applications, it's as though he has large range cutting powers by using the strings offensively, as well as cloning powers through weaving his strings together, flying powers through running his strings through clouds, and puppeteering powers by attaching his strings to others. And of course, who can forget Trafalgar Law? With the excuse that his fruit allows him to turn the space around him into an operating room, suddenly we've got a character with cutting, telekinesis, swapping, electricity, and way more. So as we can see, it's around this midpoint in the story and onwards where Oda clearly started to explore abilities that, while technically were still just one thing on paper, did finally allow him to give his characters a wider range of powers. But the true game changer that blew the door open on multi-powered characters was one simple concept: Mythical Zoans. With Mythical Zoans, Oda was finally able to truly leave behind the rule, one fruit, one ability. Because with Mythical Zoans, characters can now transform into a creature that can have multiple abilities, often completely distinct from one another. The very first Mythical Zoan, the Phoenix Fruit, immediately establishes this for us. The Phoenix Fruit granted flight and regeneration and healing powers and flame constructs, all along with the physical stats boost that comes with Zoan transformations. This was the gateway to allowing Oda to write characters that could have countless abilities. Finally, Oda could write a character like Kaido, a villain with an absurd package of different powers rather than just a one-note wonder. Kaido obviously gets a huge stats buff from having the physical size and power of a dragon, but he also has fire attacks, lightning attacks, wind attacks, and even abilities that don't really make sense for an Eastern dragon. Like, for some reason, giant magma armor on a scale well beyond what even the actual magma devil fruit user has shown. Basically, with the excuse of the Mythical Zoan concept, Oda can now write characters with any combination of abilities that he wants, by simply stretching the idea of what a creature in mythology hypothetically can do. For example, yes, Eastern dragons are known to use clouds to fly, but Oda can take that concept and now declare that Kaido can literally lift entire islands into the sky by, using clouds. Keep in mind that manipulating clouds to fly and to lift islands into the air would ordinarily have been a single, very strong Paramecia ability back in the day, probably something like the Cloud Fruit. But with the concept of Mythical Zoans, Oda can simply take that crazy ability and wrap it into an insane bundle alongside a bunch of other crazy abilities for one single character. And because this is Oda's world, the concept of Mythical Zoan becomes a sort of excuse where what the Mythical Zoan does doesn't even technically have to fully mirror what the actual mythology in the real world behind the creature is. If Oda wants Kaido to have a giant magma Susanoo, then Oda can just declare that this is what dragons in the One Piece world can do, and just like that, Kaido gets a magma Susanoo on top of everything else. Mythical Zoans essentially broke the lock that existed on One Piece ability sets, where before one fruit meant one ability, and if Oda wanted characters to have robust movesets, then he had to really stretch to think of how a single ability could allow a wide variety of applications. But now Oda can simply declare X character has the ability to transform into a made-up being that has a bunch of powers like telekinesis and poison and explosions and so on. As we've seen, even the most basic Mythical Zoans generally grant a physical stats buff plus at least one other special ability, and the more powerful Mythical Zoans can do a lot more. However, if we've seen that the story has progressed from one fruit one ability to Mythical Zoans that are one fruit multiple abilities, then the final step that Oda was heading towards for the final saga all along was the God Fruit concept. One fruit, boundless abilities. So obviously the god fruits that we know of, such as the Nika fruit, are so far technically being classified into the same category as Mythical Zoans, but that is in name only. Functionally, there is a clear difference between this specific subset of fruits that Luffy and Imu's Zoans fall into, compared to all previous Mythical Zoans. There is a reason that despite how powerful Zoan fruits like Kaido's are, even they are not viewed as a world-breaking threat like the Nika fruit, and they don't give one the power to control the world like Imu's fruit. That's because this caliber of fruit that is based on deities such as the Sun God or the Devil itself don't just give the user a powerful set of abilities, they give a near unlimited range of abilities. In a world where most fruits only grant one power, Luffy and Imu's fruits frankly just break the rules. Consider Imu's powers for just a second. Imu can create contracts that gift increased strength and regeneration to others in return for absolute obedience. Imu can telepathically communicate with and command his subordinates. He can seemingly grant his subordinates mythical Zoan powers. He can possess his subordinates and use them as avatars. He can create a shadow form that can regenerate from any and all damage. He can convert his enemies into puppets that fight for him and amplify their powers. These puppets can then create an additional army of puppets for him. Imu can transform into a form that grants an extreme physical stats boost. He can fly, he can teleport, he can create weapons, he can bring inanimate objects to life, he can create and manipulate a seemingly all-powerful black flame that can be used for offense, for defense, for explosions, for gigantification, for constructs, for healing, and we likely haven't even reached the depths of his powers yet. The list of Imu's powers simply goes on and on and on. Do you see how absurdly different this is from all devil fruits before it? In a universe where having a single ability like Magma already puts you in the top echelon of strongest fruit abilities, Imu's devil powers are basically on another planet. This is the type of thing you would traditionally see in another series like Naruto, where characters may have access to hundreds of different broken jutsus. But here in One Piece, it's just completely unfair, because it fundamentally breaks the rules of the game so far. And it makes sense why Oda ultimately went into this territory. After all, a concept like dragon or a phoenix, while capable of many things in mythology, and even more in the One Piece world if Oda stretches the interpretation of what they could hypothetically do, even these creatures ultimately should still have some limits. It wouldn't make sense, for example, if the dragon fruit allows you to create contracts. But when it comes to deities, such as the Sun God or the Devil, well, God and the Devil in the first place are often viewed as omnipotent, so it's completely up to Oda to decide the limits however he sees fit. With the God fruits, Oda now has the freedom to think of as many abilities as he possibly can stuff into a single all-powerful being. And that's why it's so important that the only other fruit that is comparable in its limitless potential to Imu's fruit is, of course, the other God fruit, the counterpart to Imu's fruit, the Nika fruit. And here, once again, it appears all the rules are broken. Much like Imu, Luffy can casually do things like change his size, his strength, conjure items, and so on, and while it doesn't seem like Luffy can do all of the tricks Imu can, Luffy can do a lot of things that Imu can't, as Luffy's power seems to break all limits in a different sort of way, such as literally bending the nature of reality and physics to his whim. The two fruits deliberately parallel one another in their introductions, with each coming in with their own music, precisely because they are of a separate category than all other fruits before them. These are the only two nigh unlimited powers in the story, and that's precisely why they are destined enemies. Only a god fruit can take on another god fruit. I think the Nidhogg fruit is one interesting final piece in this equation, as in terms of lore, the fruit is clearly of comparable significance to the Nika fruit. The previous Nidhogg user was the equal of the previous Nika user. The Nidhogg is seen alongside Nika and the Devil as one of the four prominent beings of the mural. Imu himself recognizes Nika and Nidhogg as a duo, and the legends of Elbaf also portray them as a duo. The Nidhogg fruit also clearly far outclasses all other devil fruits besides the Nika fruit and Imu's fruit. In terms of size alone, it's arguable that no other devil fruits could even harm the Nidhogg, and that's before accounting for its unprecedented ability to erase islands in a single breath. The Nidhogg transformation frankly feels closer to an ancient weapon than a fruit ability. However, the simple differentiating factor is that ultimately the Nidhogg fruit lacks the limitless potential of the god fruits. It's important to remember that the Nidhogg fruit isn't inherently this strong, it's only because it was eaten by an ancient giant that it has reached such an absurd level of power. power. But the fruit's power normally is likely not much more than that of, say, Kaido's fruit. What we're seeing here is likely the strongest normal Mythical Zoan in the hands of the strongest possible user that pushes it to its maximum potential, but I believe the fruit doesn't quite cross over to God Fruit territory on its own, as it doesn't really break the game like Imu's fruit does or the Nika fruit has the potential to do. Even if Loki himself is seemingly stronger than Luffy right now, it's likely because Luffy so far has only scratched the surface of his powers. It does appear that the Nika fruit is the one and only true counterpart to Imu's fruit, as this is the endgame that Oda was building towards the entire time, the final evolution of powers in One Piece. We went from fruits initially having just one ability, to Mythical Zoans where fruits could finally grant multiple abilities, to finally the God fruits that grant near limitless abilities. And that's precisely why the showdown between the Sun God and the Devil is so exciting to see, because this is where Oda can finally exercise his creativity to its fullest, between two characters who can fight seemingly without limits. So let me know in the comments below what you think of how Oda progressed the concept of devil fruits over time, and if you want to hear my thoughts on potential other God Zoans that could be coming, then you can listen to my weekly podcast that just dropped by becoming a member or supporting me on Patreon, link in the description below.